Welcome, everyone, to the first of 8 Oceanside chats that are very special because they're for our 2021 Summer Smasher program. On this call, we encourage you to use the chat function to network with each other. Introduce yourself to everyone else who's on this call. In addition, please follow the basic guidelines for the presentation, as you can see here. And without further ado, I want to introduce Dave Cole. He is our speaker today. Please, Dave Cole, introduce yourself at length and let's get this show on the road.
Thanks, RC. Appreciate the kind words. Quick introduction and my background is I am the classic inch wide, mile deep. I've been in cybersecurity since I moved to Los Angeles from Michigan back in 1996. So I always vowed I'd get out of cybersecurity. I have failed miserably at getting out of cybersecurity, and it's been a happy thing. Yeah, go blue. So I'm a proud Wolverine. So having said that, though, USC invested in my company versus Wolverine, so I feel pretty good about the Trojans these days too. So, all right. So I'll kind of go to the abbreviated version of the story. So I started out with Deloitte and Touche. Back when it was Deloitte and Touche and not just Deloitte. And they got me out of from Michigan to LA, which just the first time I came out in a frozen spring break felt like home. And I've lived in Los Angeles ever since. All of my time has been in cybersecurity. My first few jobs, I was a consultant. And then I decided that I could build a better product than I was using. And I got the opportunity with a crew out of Orange County called Foundstone, which today is a pretty elite group of folks who are there. So running with that crew was awesome. We built and sold. I was the first product person there. I got the product bug and I jumped from there to Symantec. We had a crazy startup experience, like full on, soap opera style. So I retreated to a bigger company to learn how to build products at scale, which at the time, Symantec was still a good company. It's been a while. But back in 2004, they were a pretty reasonable choice. And I did a whole bunch of things there, but I didn't do the enterprise products. I did consumer. So through my years, I ended up running the Norton product line, which at scale was about 2 billion plus. So that was where I got experience in consumer. Even though I'm in enterprise and have done enterprise ever since then, I did it before. I spent half a decade in consumer, which was amazing. Those of you who are in consumer, my heart bleeds for you. It's incredibly hard. Enterprise is so much easier. And that's why I do it. Like, it was super hard. I did the experimentation, the heartbreak and everything. I tilted towards enterprise where I can just build something and someone gives me a check for it. So I can admit that weakness. I like that. I like that clarity. But I switched from after my run at Symantec was done. I spent a very long time there. I went in as a director over an internal group. I left as a VP over a $3 billion business. And I was let go in a riff. So I spent the summer really with my 1-year-old and my family and kind of figuring out what I was going to do next and jumped from there into CrowdStrike, which some of you may have heard of. I was the first chief product officer there. And kind of got them on. I'm going to tell some stories from CrowdStrike, and I'm going to tell a bunch of stories as we go through this to kind of illustrate points. But I got CrowdStrike in their position through their Series C, high five the CEO, and then I went off and I was asked by the investors to get another company, Tenable, through their IPO. Did that, and I'd always wanted to start my own company, and I realized that I had one last one in me in cybersecurity, and ran into an old friend from my consulting days that I've known for 20 years. And we decided to start OpenRaven early in 2019. And we were funded by Upfront, who's the biggest VC here in Los Angeles, in the spring of 2019. OpenRaven today is post-revenue. We have several large customers, Electronic Arts, Toyota, Sauce Labs, a fintech company called Aperture. We just started selling the product last November. First customer sales in December of last year. So we right now are gearing up for what likely will be our Series B raise right around the corner. Our investors are Upfront, as I mentioned before, but also Kleiner Perkins, who some of you may know. So that's a little bit of the background of OpenRaven. So some of the stories I'm going to tell are incredibly fresh. meaning, we're either living them now or we just lived them over the past 18 to 24 months. So hopefully that's fun for you, because all of you and some of you are names that are familiar and folks that I've talked to in the past. So, part of, I think, the fun of just telling stories to you is these are things that I've lived through in the past and I'm actually living through right now too. So I'll be incredibly candid about what we've done well and what we haven't and what we learned from it. Everything I'm going to tell you, there are counter examples too. And there was a kind of hilarious tweet I think it was a week or so ago. And it was like, give me startup advice and I will give you a counter example. And I think that's 100% true. Like, anything I'm going to tell you, remember, it comes from a guy who spent 25 years in cybersecurity, inch wide, mile deep. So much of what I'm doing is applicable probably to yourself, even if you're in a different industry, but your mileage is going to vary. If you come out of this and you take a couple things that really help you, I will consider that a success. And I'm imploring your wisdom in knowing what to take and what to discard. So having said that, I've got my top 10 here. And I'm going to start with the early stuff and kind of plow through. So the first one, and I'm going to give you a big old pause. The first big mistake that I've seen, that I've actually been on the right side of both times, is it's throwing your first product away, your first idea for a product. We had this idea back at Foundstone in the heady days of 2000, 2001 for an automated hacking machine. We were pen testers at the time. That means we were paid to break into people's networks and so forth. And it was super cool, but it was starting to get more mundane. And we looked at this and said, aha, we can automate the hacking process. We got into it and we realized that that wasn't what people wanted whatsoever. And part of the reason they didn't want it is they're having a hard enough time just keeping their systems up. They said, yeah, dummy, like that's great if you can auto hack our stuff. How about you just find the vulnerabilities and we'll fix it ourselves? Like, we don't need you to auto hack it. So it's kind of funny. We got into it and said, well, that was amazing. Like the VCs loved it. It was great for funding. It was amazing for illustrating the concept and showing that we could do cool things. It absolutely would have been hot garbage if we would have pursued that as a business idea. So we had the guts to kind of make the call at that point and say, actually, what we're going to do is we were going to take this fledgling field that was called vulnerability assessment and turn it into vulnerability management, into something that can become an enterprise-wide discipline, as opposed to this really cool product idea we had. And that company eventually went on and it sold for a decent multiple to McAfee about 4.5 years later. But if we would have stuck with the product idea, it would have sucked. I don't think anybody would have bought it and we would have failed and there wouldn't have been an audience for it. So it's sometimes that initial idea is really just good for calibrating what not to do and what people really, really want. OpenRaven, I'll tell you a story just, straight from 2019. So my co-founder and I founded the company. I had been hearing all of these stories from chief information security officers and from my network. Oh, we don't know how many assets we have and so on. And I kept hearing it. And I really wanted to build it at Tenable where I was, but I knew that I couldn't. I was constrained by other ambitions the company had and by the IPO. So when I left, I said, aha, I know what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to go out and I'm going to build this thing that's going to take in all this asset data, and I'm going to get people down to a single number and a single list, the one asset list. And I'm going to make it freaking beautiful, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be like, cue the Game of Thrones music and that amazing map you see in the beginning taking you through it. That's what I'm going to build. And I got my co-founder to agree to it. And about 4 months into it, realized that ain't what we're going to build. And the reason is that we kept hearing from people that said, aha, if you were to do that, it would be really cool if you could tell us what data was on those devices. And I rejected it. I didn't realize I was rejecting it. And I kept hearing it and I kept writing it down. And the magic here was that I wrote it down. And I still have this document to this day. It is 45, 50 pages long. It has Gartner reports in it. It has notes from copious meetings. It has conversations I had over the phone where I furiously jotted down notes. And then one day in the middle of July, our direction wasn't feeling right. Our category of things weren't feeling right. So I took a Sunday, I poured myself a glass of wine. I'm like, I'm gonna go back through my notes. And as I did, I realized that the entire direction of the company was wrong, that this data thing was massive, and that was where we needed to focus instead. And the only reason I could see it was because I'd written it down and I had been open to changing directions. And that's been the focus of the company ever since. And I picked up the phone, called my co-founder, and he said, yeah, he's like, that makes a world of sense. And off we went. And I'd say, again, you can't have too much intellectual certainty on that initial idea. You have to have the pliability. Yes, it has to gel. Yes, you have to commit at some point. But that first idea may very well be wrong, and you have to be willing to throw it away as you learn more and get deeper into the discipline, into the idea. All right, so I will pause there.
Well, I'll kick it off with 2 questions. Number 1, how did you guys determine that there was no customer for that AI hacking product? And the follow-up to that was, how long did you and your team struggle with the decision to trash that?
It wasn't a struggle at all. That one, it was kind of plain as day. We just got, we had plenty of contacts. A bunch of us had been in consulting, and we went back to the customers and they basically said, look, dummy, here's my problem. It isn't that I need a bunch of people to automatically hack things. It's that I have a Class B network sitting on the internet that I can't complete a scan for. And, I don't even know what's out there. So it became really abundantly obvious that it's like, we were pitching, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, useful construct, we were pitching enlightenment, and they're like, dude, like food and water, please. Can we do this? So, and
Right.
it was, yeah.
It was almost like you guys were solving your own personal problem with having to do this mundane work.
Bingo. That was exactly it. It's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to encourage everyone on the chat to either use the hand raise function or just straight up turn on your video. If you guys have a question for this first chunk, take advantage of our good friend.
Yeah. If not, I'll keep going.
I will give it one more second. Go. Oh, here we go. Laura.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So you mentioned that your product recently launched in November or so, and that you're sort of ramping up. What marketing or go-to-market strategies are you using to ramp up scale?
Content. We believe that great marketing is a dialogue with the industry, and an authentic, transparent one. And we also believe heavily in design. Employee number 1 was our creative director. So, the security industry generally sucks at design, and things are ugly, and they sell a lot on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So we focused initially on having a brand that looked and felt different. We don't allow red for the most part on the website. It sneaks in sometimes, but like fear colors and dark things, like, nah. So first off, we invest in a brand, and we crank out content. It means yours truly writes a bunch, so does my co-founder, so do the technical people. Like, we're a maker culture, and we think that, I'm on socials. I don't like social networks, but I have to be on socials. We did our spring product launch today. I had to be on socials. I do a podcast partly because that's the way that I can do social without kind of throwing up in my mouth, at least I'm producing content that I like and so forth. So I'd say like social networks are massive. Like, we tried a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, like paying for intros and that stuff. We just don't like it. We don't buy lists, the rest of it. But we think like at the heart of it is content-based marketing and conferences. We speak at a lot of conferences, and that means things like our big industry conferences, the RSA conference. I just did a big speech there on surveillance states, and it was nights and weekends. But, we believe firmly that great marketing is a conversation, a running dialogue with the market, and that, we want great, authentic technical content coming out all the time, and then putting it through the socials, putting it through conferences, turning it into white papers, ebooks, and so forth. So we've got a pretty healthy like digital kind of demand gen spend. Live events are coming back, amazing. We'll definitely use those. And we do account-based marketing too. We're not afraid of ABM as well. We use things like Sales Loft and so forth. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Nice, Dave. Navid, go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, my question is, do you recommend having a business or marketing person as a staff or co-founder and do all these marketing outreach and basically customer discovery to save some time for the CEO, or you think that's the job of the CEO and founder to do on all this hard work?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, your job as CEO is whatever other people can't do. It's usually the hardest, nastiest stuff, right? So when I came in, my co-founder was CEO in his last gig and basically said, look, I don't want to deal with investors. I like killed myself at my last company and I know I'm not the guy to be CEO. He's like, but I'll teach you, I'll tell you what I know. I said, amazing. I've always been the product leader. And candidly, I'm kind of sick after 20 years of being the product leader. He's like, great, that's what I want to do. I said, sweet, we'll just do this. You help me, I'll help you. So basically, like, he does the product and the technology side. And even though I have tons of experience in there, I help him and I have advice and opinions, and he helps me on the go-to-market side. So I think you can split it however you want. But if you expect that you can build an awesome product and ace your go-to-market at the same time, there's no way. And I think also, like, I tried handing marketing off after giving it a really good start, and it failed. Like, we brought in the wrong person. And guess who runs marketing now? Yours truly. And I am heavily involved in sales. Like, I can show you my Trello board of stuff to do. Like, I've got like 5 or 6 people I need to reach out to now who are prospective customers. So it doesn't matter how you split it up. Like, if you're CEO and you want to run product, I think that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that for an early stage company, but there better be someone or some people responsible for it. And I'll tell you, the marketing task, especially in a space like we are where there's category confusion, that ain't too small a job for the CEO. Matter of fact, investors get excited about it. When I told Kleiner, our contact Bucky at Kleiner, that I was taking back over marketing, and as well as Kara, our seed investor, they said, thank God, let's see what you can do. And afterwards, they're like, wow, Dave, that's a great use of your time. And these are very experienced, savvy investors. So, you can split it however you want, but the product has to be taken care of. And the go-to-market has to be great. It really doesn't matter how you slice it up as long as you have great people on it. But, the more, the earlier the category is and the tougher the marketing is, the more important it is for the CEO or a founder to be on it. That's my sentiment.
So even if they don't know much about the technology, that should be okay as long as they do a good job.
I disagree. I think, if you're going to be a good founder, you have to know the technology too. Like, because at some point, like, look, if something was to happen to my co-founder on the technical side, let's say that he was, to get hit by a bus, as people say, or let's say I'm in a meeting with an investor, it looks pretty shabby if, I can't answer the basic questions about the product. So I'm quite deep in the product as well. The answer is, like, if you're the big boss, if you're the CEO, you've got to know it all to a decent degree, right? I don't have to go as deep as they do, but if anything was to happen to him, or if I'm in a meeting and I get asked a deep technical question, and I take my own sales calls, I can get meetings as CEO that other people in the company can't. And sometimes they're with more technical people. If I can't represent the technology, what's going on in the product in those meetings, we'll drop a lead, right? Because we won't be credible. So I think, do you have to know it the same as the rest of the people in the product team? You don't. Just like they don't need to know the sales and marketing side as much as I do. But at this stage in the company, you truly do have to have your fingers, to a certain degree on every aspect of the business. Now that's changing for us. I don't think it'll be quite the same post Series B and post Series C, but I'll tell you the great CEOs that I've worked with, especially George Kurtz at CrowdStrike, which is now, I think, market cap of some ridiculous number. George Kurtz knew the technology inside and out, and was up in my face all the time when I was his product leader.
Thank you.
You know, talking about sales, Dave, everyone seems to have an opinion. It's like everyone's in sales, or you should do sales at least once in your life. And then there's the opinion that not sales isn't for everyone, or sales can't be taught. It's like, it's something that you're really good at, or you're never going to get good at it. What's your take on sales? Is it something that you can learn? Like, let's say you're a very, very technical founder who is just entering the world of marketing and sales, and you are responsible for it because you don't have the capital to bring on someone who can maybe do it a little bit more, I guess, experienced than you. What would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, well, there's a real easy test for people inside startups. It's like, should you be selling? It's like, well, if you're not buying, you're selling. So the answer is yes. Like, if you're in a startup, your job is sales. That's just, it's plain as day. And we even had an employee, we don't have an employee referral program for referring people in. We have an employee referral program for leads, and say, hey, we expect, everybody has equity, but still, we will pay you for leads because it's that important to the business. And, I underestimated initially the amount of my role that's sales. I don't particularly like sales, to be honest. I was always on the opposite side of salespeople, but I'll tell you, like, the best scenario is where both founders, all three founders, one founder who leads the company is selling. And look, you don't have to love it. There's gonna be plenty of things about the startup experience you don't love, but you have to do it. And if you think that you can go up and pitch an investor, if you haven't done sales, you're probably screwed. Like, every sales pitch is preparation for an investor pitch. They're very, very similar. So even if you don't like sales and you think you can somehow outsource it to someone, what are you going to do when you're in front of an investor? It's the same skill set. So I don't know, except in certain industries, like how you succeed as a startup if at least, one of the people founding the company or one of the key people founding team members isn't a great salesperson. It's a tremendous handicap. I mean, I've invested in companies like that in my early days, and they all failed. Every one of them, and they failed because they built technology, but they didn't build a business, so, and you see this, top tier investors, like, they want to know that you have relationships, that people believe in you, and that people are willing to buy from you, and that you can pitch. And that's one of the things they're evaluating when you're pitching them for investing.
Yeah. Okay, as long as no one has any more questions, I mean, I can honestly ask a million questions about sales and marketing, just because these things come up all the time at Founder Circle. So I almost feel like I ask in an effort to support the teams at the garage, but maybe just for the sake of time, we'll move it along and I'll ask them a little later.
All right. Problem number 2 is not throwing away the first version of your product. So you're probably going to throw away your first idea, and it is totally okay. Matter of fact, I think it's almost necessary to throw away the first version of your product. I mean, think of the first time you did anything, let alone something as complicated as a product, especially, any kind of product, software, hardware, the rest of it. Like, the first version is really a prototype, and that's how I would encourage you to look at it. At OpenRaven, we had a number of great ideas for what the product should be, and we pushed our first deployment super early. I think we did our first deployment after 4 to 5 months of building the product. And we went out and we stubbed our toe. We screwed it up. We had a terrible day. We tried like 3 deployments. I don't think any of them worked. And afterwards, we're like, wow, that sucked. That really hurt our feelings. But the next day we came back and said, great, here's what we learned. Here's what didn't work. And oh, by the way, like, there's a number of kind of rework we need to do because our assumptions changed, totally okay. And then when the pandemic hit, we actually got even more aggressive with scrapping things that we'd already built because we realized no one was going to deploy anything new. People had more important things to do, like take care of their families. And, our customers were adjusting to remote work as well and trying to shore up existing, capacity and so on. So we just took it and pretty much redid the whole thing. I'll tell you, there's another company that recently was bought by Cisco that was built by practitioners. There were a bunch of guys at Bank of America who saw the vulnerability prioritization problem, and they built a company called Kenna. And Kenna's technology was super interesting, but it didn't scale. It didn't really work because they never built a product before. They are the rare instance of a company who scrapped the damn product, rebuilt it, and ended up selling to Cisco for a huge multiple. But it wasn't clear they were going to make it for a period of time. But they had the fortitude to go back and say, we just can't do this anymore. We're going to scrap this. And I was in front of their customers in the early days, and every one of them was kind of face palming. So much potential. Product sucks because it was the first thing they did and it wasn't good. It's just the way things go. So I would say go in if you're in the midst of like your early days of building the product, if you're thinking, you know what, we might have backed ourselves into a corner with this thing, do it. Just give yourself permission to start over. Even very, very experienced people, give themselves permission to trash like the initial version and even sometimes the second version of what they've done. Your future self will high five you. So I'm going to move on for sake of time. If there's anybody who really wants to chime in, feel free to do so. The next thing is, and I've talked about throwing away the first idea, throwing away the first version of the product. The next one is kind of the opposite. You have to lock in at some point. When you get that conviction and certainty, you have to lock in. And there's a great saying that I'm going to steal from a guy named Eric Wolford, who's one of our investors, and he's been at Excel for ages. And Eric says, startups do not die from starvation. They die from indigestion. And what he's trying to say here is the sheer number of ideas and the number of things you try and execute on will kill you and will kill the company. So I'm going to use another example from CrowdStrike. I joined in 2013. The company really it started in late 2011, did a whole bunch of work in 2012. And then I came in with the charter to decrapify the product line in kind of late 2013 after they'd been at it for about 18 months. The problem is in 18 months, they launched not one, not two, but 3 products. And one of those products was amazingly complex. And almost none of it worked well. Literally, one of the products was being sold for $500,000 a pop for subscriptions. And it was running on a WordPress server or Drupal server sitting out of like some contractor's garage, and it was horrendous. It had an API in it that was updated once a week, whether it needed it or not. In this API, customer expectation was updated, maybe once every hour at least, or maybe even once every 15 minutes because the contents in it had to be fresh. They had a disaster on their hands. Why? Well, they had 3 good ideas. They were all good ideas. There was no problem with any of them. The problem was when you have one company, early stage, trying to execute 3 ideas, one of them, which is a category unto itself. So starvation will not kill you. Indigestion will. Once you've got to lock in, you've got to pick in, you try to do more stuff, you will fail. There is a richness and a depth when you get into the right problem set, and you have to respect that. And you have to feel your way through. What's the point to where the customer feels like it's mature and to where they feel like they're willing to invest and that it's doing the job for them? And it simply takes time to do that. And if you're scattering your attention across more than one problem, if you're trying to do too many jobs, you simply can't get to the level of depth where anyone will hire you to do the job they want you to do. And it's, we realized this at OpenRaven as well. The deeper we got into it, we thought that there was a threshold for people to engage with a free product. We got into it, we realized the deployments weren't there, the interest wasn't there. So what did we do? We said, great, we're going to decommission the free product because we missed it, but we still believe we have our paid thesis and we know people will engage on the paid product. Great, and that's exactly how it played out. But we had to be willing to walk away from that and willing to go even deeper. And the same thing was true at Tenable when I went in there as a chief product officer. It was they had products that were, basically they had things on their website that were for a completely different seller. They had products where there were completely different customers even. And, I went into their net promoter scores and I found a negative net promoter score for our core market. And they said, look, we're trying to do too much. Take it off the website. Take this out. Like, let's not be afraid to be something that's a little less sexy. And that was part of it. Like, they didn't want the identity of this kind of unsexy, unloved product line. So they'd steer it out in other areas that were kind of more attractive to certain people and kind of felt the image they wanted. And one of the first things I did is I came in and said, like, if you're a pickup truck, like, it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with a Ford F-150. Like, we're not a Lamborghini, and that's all right. Like, we're a Ford F-150, and you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna put big fat tires on it. We're gonna paint flames down the side. We're gonna be the biggest, baddest ass F-150 you've ever seen. And that kind of freedom to focus and invest in it yielded a lot. And I didn't kill all the products. Some we repurposed. Some we even ended up acquiring companies into, entire companies where we were kind of dabbling before. So, know your customer, and you have to focus. And if you're choosing between, do we go broad or do we go deep? The answer is almost unequivocally, go deep. People will pay you to go deep. There's a time to go broad too, and usually it's when you need to signal maturity, but depth is almost always the answer as opposed to breadth. You almost have to earn the right to expand. All right, I'll pause there.
All right, we do have a question in the chat. Naomi, if you'd like, you can turn on your video and ask away. Otherwise, it's right up in there.
Okay. So my question is very related to my current very early stage company. So we have a business idea and we actually don't have product yet. So we spend too much time iterating a lot of our ideas and iterating our product, but we actually don't have an actual product yet. Since we're actually are pressured by time to, to test our MVP. That's why I'm not really, because we also join a lot of incubator and a lot of people give us different ideas. And how do we actually leverage those resources that given the kind of ideas that are given to us, and some of ideas are actually conflicting with each other. And is it normal for us to just iterate our ideas until we really finalize and we agree on something, and then we just make product, or we instead we just create a limited product, and then just try and see how it goes? Thanks.
Yeah. It's a big question, and I'm going to speak out of my own personal experience and biases and so forth. So again, like, take what you like, throw away the rest. If you do what investors tell you to do, you're completely screwed. It seems antithetical, but investors aren't deep in the problem set you are. The answer is get super deep inside your customer's mind, like get deep inside their head. And understand the job that you're doing for them. There's a format called the Jobs to Be Done framework. There's books on it and a Wikipedia page. Just read the Wikipedia page. The book kind of sucks. It's by a guy named Tony Olwick. It's boring reading. But having said that, the concept is this. The customer doesn't want to buy your product. They want to get a job done. Understand the customer deeply, the job they want to be done. And if you're doing that and interviewing them and staying tight to them, they will tell you when you've hit the bar to where it's of interest to them, where you've earned the right for them to invest time and energy into it. But all these other people, that's fine. They have ideas. Like, I'm interested in other people's opinions when I've constrained my options down to a couple things. I don't go out to any of these people and say, well, what color should this be? I come back to them and I say, I think it's pink or green. Like, which one do you think it is? So I'd say, like, investor feedback, subject matter expert feedback, and the rest of it works best when it has constrained optionality. When it has unconstrained optionality and you're not deep inside the customer's head, like, that's when you get all this crazy feedback that yanks you around to different places. So hopefully that's helpful, Naomi.
Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions from the group? Otherwise, I do have one. Okay, sorry, there's some gardening. My question is regarding breadth versus depth and how you always say go deep instead of going broad. Is that your product or is that with your customer? Is it both? Because
Product.
I often feel like if you try to be all things to all people and you start kind of desegmenting and realizing all of the use cases for your solution, you can kind of get a little bit lost in, I don't know, developing more of the depth of your product because not every industry has the same kind of deeper issues. And so I'm wondering if that applies to when you're kind of targeting your customer, if it makes sense to go deep with segment or to kind of broaden and see whether your product has, you know, legs in different areas.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a premise behind this, which is make sure you're picking a problem that's has enough total addressable market, enough TAM to be meaningful, right? Like, you know, so I'm assuming that from the outset. But yes, you know, that's a big thing. Like, look, if the product's too specific, and you hear this from investors all the time, right? They look at it. Now, I'll tell you, like, I sit on a board, I talk to lots of investors, more than I prefer to talk to. And a real common reason for not investing is they just look at it and say, not big enough. Like, totally, you should build this and people will like it and someone's going to acquire your company. But the thing is, investors make money off the big hits. They don't make money off base hit singles and doubles. They make money off of grand slams. They would rather invest in 10 companies that feel like grand slams and knowing full well that 9 of them are going to fail than invest in a bunch of stuff that seems safe and reasonable and might turn into something okay. So part of the problem is, yes, you have to pick something that is a big problem. And provided that it's a big enough problem, then you go deep and respect the richness and complexity and depth of the problem itself.
Got it, thanks. Is there more, Dave?
Yeah, we're only halfway down the first page. Come on now.
Okay, because I just want to make sure we're at 112, and if you're happy to go over the 130 mark, we'll be very happy to have you. I know you're a very busy man, but
we're going to speed read through the rest of this. We'll speed read through the rest. So we'll do a few less questions. And I'll keep my stories to a minimum here. So the next one is not enough customer interaction. At the end of the day, there is zero substitute for getting out in front of a customer. I invested in a company called Revere.ai. Beautiful product, great technology from subject matter experts. Waited too long to interact with customers. As a result, they built a great platform and a great technology that had no customers. And it was bonkers, absolutely bonkers. OpenRaven, we went out probably too early to customers, but the learnings that we got from those early customers and so forth were absolutely vital. And one of the learnings was we had this super cool model that we thought we deploy into a customer's own cloud presence. And we turned out that premise was completely wrong once we started deploying it, because we realized the unique nature of each cloud and how much it was slowing us down. We pivoted off of that. We would have persisted in that model for many, many months and made it beautifully wrong if we hadn't have interacted with customers. Revere.ai went out of business. It was my first investment, and I invested a not insubstantial amount of money into it, and it completely went out of business because they simply didn't have a customer archetype that was right next to them that they were building for. They had a poor understanding of the job. They built a beautiful platform that didn't really do anything specifically well. It was right in the middle. It was just too much work for people. I consider that, I call it the Denny's model, right? It's not quite fast and it's not quite a sit-down restaurant. It's kind of fast, casual. And the only reason I've ever found the people to go to Denny's is because they're drunk and it's 2 a.m. and they want breakfast. They want a bad sandwich or an omelet. So, be something specific enough to be someone's first choice. And the only way you get that, I found, is really through, tons of customer feedback. Next one up. This is the opposite. too much customer direction. I call it the short order kitchen syndrome. This is when you have a poor grasp of what that job is and the problem you're solving. So basically, you're taking in all sorts of feedback from customers without having a really strong spine behind the idea. So the problem has to be bounded. You have to have your boundaries so that you have permission to say no. Otherwise, indigestion, you take on too many things and you do a poor job of all of it. So at the end of the day, this is kind of the company Tenable, where I was chief product officer at, where I went in and had to get them ready for the IPO. The first thing I did is I killed a couple products, and I killed a couple more because they weren't our customer. They were somebody else's customer, and the go-to-market action on the sales and marketing side was never going to work. Our sellers didn't even know how to talk to these people. Those were the easy decisions that winnowed down the product line. And then we expanded out. What did we expand into? The things our customers were asking about and the things that they were starting to invest in startups for. We said, oh, no, we can do that too. But because we were trying to pull in these other customers, we just didn't have the capacity to listen to what was right in front of us. By the way, you can build a business just executing against customers' desires. It's either a consultancy, which there's nothing wrong with. And then on the flip, there's a small company called Tosni. I run a podcast called Security Voices. You can see it on securityvoices.org. And I interviewed bootstrappers. And there's a guy on there who bootstrapped the whole business. And he does that by competing for government contracts. And he goes from contract to contract. And eventually he'll build a product. But in the meantime, he does just fine doing whatever the government needs. But you have to build your business expressly for that purpose. If you dabble in it and you kind of indulge yourself in a myriad of problems with different customer voices and so forth, and you don't have that strong spine, you don't bound to the problem at all, like you'll end up either building consultancy, more likely you build a failed product business, or you just have to tailor your entire business to that. Otherwise, there's really no way to be successful. Next up, and I have pretty strong opinions on this, but the next big mistake I see is outsourcing engineering and design. It's tempting, it's expensive, but I think it's a huge mistake. Yes, your business may not require that. I didn't invest personally in another business, but I'm part of a couple scout funds. I put a little bit of money in a company that is never going to go anywhere. And I'll tell you, after watching them for 2-3 years, they have a really hard time getting funding. And the CEO is always looking for that product person who can get deep into the technology. And his co-founder is not really a co-founder who's technical. He always kind of sits on the side and he has a day job. The problem is, they just never get deep enough in the problem set to build anything meaningful. And they never have enough direct attention to the customer, and they waste money on all sorts of contractors who really don't care if they solve the problem or not. So even when they get the feedback, it falls straight to the floor because the people who are building the product don't hear it and they don't have any skin in the game. I personally have kind of never seen this work. And I'll go back to the question from Naveed. I think the right answer here is ideally you have a go-to-market focused founder and a technical founder, and the two overlap. You can have a third founder as well, or you can have one and a strong founding team around them. But at the end of the day, outsourcing all your technical work, especially for software, but I think for most things these days, is a big mistake. I think there's richness as you get into the problem that you have to respect, and you need people working on it who feel ownership. A few more. Underinvesting in the first experience. People have a relationship with products, and this isn't just consumer products, it's enterprise products as well. If that first experience with the product is that it's painful and hard to deploy, or it just looks like everything else, you'll lose people in the first minute. Just like people have impressions of you for the first moment that they meet you, it's the same for a product. CrowdStrike, one of the things that did very well, it was super easy to deploy. We had customers that would over deploy by tens of thousands of sensors, and the investors loved that story, and the sales team loved it too. And the same thing happened to Signal Sciences, who's an LA darling. They sold to Fastly recently. And one of the reasons they did so well is, I'll never forget this. I was sitting in an event last year, back when we were all in person, right before the pandemic hit. And the chief security officer of PayPal, someone asked him, like, what startup products impressed you? And he said, oh, Signal Sciences. He's like, we just couldn't believe how easy it was. That first experience was amazing. That's what he said. And you cannot pay for that marketing. It was staggering. Every startup person in the room was the envied Signal Sciences at that moment, including yours truly. At OpenRaven, what we've done is we've created a beautiful 3D map that's that first experience. And I had an investor tell me 2 weeks ago, he said, there's some buzz about you guys. They say that you guys killed it with the first experience. So do not underestimate the first user experience, the FUE, the FUI, if you want to, boil it down to a little word. It is absolutely critical. And what's your goal? What's your goal for the first user experience? It's to create a reach for the wallet moment. You want the person psychologically, after that first interaction with the product, to reach for their wallet. That's what you want to design for. You will fall short, and that's okay. It takes time to get there, but that's what you're designing for. That moment where the person reaches into their purse, reaches into their wallet, gets ready to spend with you, and psychologically commits to spend with you. I had a call today where we had a proof of concept that didn't go terribly well. And I did a call with the guy, and I just wanted to thank him for giving us a shot. And he literally stopped me in the middle. He said, "We're not done yet." He said, "We're going to continue." He's like, "You guys are onto something. We love that. We love what you guys did here. We think you can do that elsewhere too. But you guys aren't walking away. We're not done with you by any stretch." And a lot of that was the first experience, was the demo that I did for him. And that first day still sticks in his head and in his team. I'm going to pause here real quickly. Big questions?
It's funny that you mentioned there's one question in the chat, and I'll get to it, but we just had a product wow moment Oceanside chat last week, and you said almost the exact same thing as our previous speaker. It's kind of like that Fry Futurama take my money meme, where you just can't, this product did something in real life, in real time, that you've either never seen before, or it's never been done in that way, and you just can't say no to it. And so I think it's been really great advice for the teams at the garage, because they all started looking back at their product and try to identify, like, in our demo, what would that be? What is our product's wow moment when they do their demos? So it's kind of interesting to have those back to back. Okay, so the question in the chat from Andrew, it's about investors. Andrew, do you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you for having me. My quick question for you would be, just from the perspective of not just investors, but employees, there's going to be difficult periods during any startup's time, challenges, et cetera, financial challenges, or whatever it be, regulatory, if you're dealing with medical devices and pharma. What do you look for from a personality standpoint? Everyone looks great and rosy in an interview, but in terms of down the line, how are the personalities going to work out? Who's potentially going to become a part of your board? And, how do you screen for that, or just find the people that are going to be resilient during those challenges?
Yeah, it's hard. It's incredibly hard. Board's different, and you don't have to do it that often, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it. And it's one of those where, like, when you unlock that achievement, when that becomes a big deal for you later, like, call me. But the board, you're looking to fill specific roles, right? Like, you're looking for someone to augment the leadership team. Like, for us, both my co-founder and I are product heavy. We want someone to join our board who's more go-to-market heavy, to complement us, and who can answer those questions and kind of coach our go-to-market people on our team. Not that we don't have those abilities, but because we're not especially strong in them, and we haven't run that before. So with a board seat, you're looking to complement the executive team and fill in the gaps and open up doors. At some point, we may want to get into federal government sales. Right. So it may make sense to bring someone on who's deep in that area and can open doors for us. Right. For the team, here's what you're after. You don't want superheroes. Like, if a person, like, seems like a superhero and they got a cape on their back and so forth, that's not really what you're after. Like, you're after cockroaches. And I'll say myself is that I'm a cockroach. Like, my superpower is, you drop me off a 20-story building, I'm probably going to be able to get up and walk away. Wow. Like, that's what you're looking for. And how about, hey, who survives the pandemic, right?
Right.
We did the first virtual raise that had ever been done with Kleiner Perkins. There's an article up on Business Insider, them talking about it. It wasn't announced yet. Mm-hmm. And look, you're going to get tons of curveballs. It's painful. There's just, especially last year, oh my God, the number of things we had to deal with as entrepreneurs, so painful. Who survives that? It's not the person who jumps jobs every 6 months. I'll tell you that. Like, look through your LinkedIn, look at their LinkedIn. You see someone who's moved jobs, this year, that next year, 6 to 8 months, they're not your hire. Look for the person, look for the person who digs in and does 2 to 3 year stints, because they've gutted out some stuff that probably sucked, but they committed to the team, they committed to it. You are going to have hard moments. I pray to God none of us have more hard moments like last year. Last year had a multitude of them. But having said that, even in great startups, CrowdStrike is one of the most successful companies in all of security. It damn near didn't make it. It was painful. You can't take the pain out of it. No. You just have to hire for people who aren't afraid of pain and who will commit to you. And I think one of the ways is look at the history, right? Did they do it in the past? Where did they commit in the past?
That makes total sense. Appreciate it.
Great.
All right. I'm going to blaze through the rest of these here.
Great.
The final three, one is road mapping ineffectively. Here's my philosophy on roadmaps. So first off, don't worry too much about it in the very beginning. You're going to be small enough and you're kind of feeling your way through it. But once you've done your first deployments and you have customers using it, like we were talking about with Naomi earlier, then you need to build a roadmap. Once you're clear on your idea and what you're building. And here to me is kind of how I think about it. First off, you need 3 months of really clear headlights. You need to know exactly what you're doing for 3 months. And look, at OpenRaven right now, we're struggling with this ourselves. But in an ideal world, when I've got a product organizational maturity, I want 3 months of work that's properly spec'd out and very clear. And again, like, we're not there at OpenRaven, to be clear. I've gotten there with CrowdStrike. I got there to a certain degree with Tenable as well. The next step after that is you want about 3 months of things that are in design, meaning things that you're starting to work through the design of. That gives you 6 months of kind of transparency in front of you. After that, I want 6 months of really strong concepts of where we're going to go. I don't necessarily want a committed roadmap for 12 months. It's too complicated for that. Give yourself the room to breathe. Second to last problem is launching too late or too early. You have to be careful with your launch. Ideally, it's an event that you use to bring in customers. That means you probably want to launch after your first deployments. Ideally, you want to launch with someone who's willing to be quoted and talk about your product. Like, that's a key thing. Media is awesome for a launch. They're not going to cover you for both your funding announcement and your initial launch and then cover your product launch later. Mash them together into one big launch. And you don't want a set of little explosions. You want one big boom. So choose the right timing for the launch to be a time when the product's ready enough to where you can invite people in. Last thing is, ironically, after all of this, worrying too much about the product. I recently took a board seat on a company where I did it and I invested in the company because the CEO has crazy hustle. And I wanted to work with him because, whereas I said, like, I don't particularly like the sales side of it. I like the marketing. I don't like the sales. He is a sales machine. He loves it. He hustles. And I knew he could get the product right with a little bit of help. So look, you have to build a business. You can't just build a technology. Don't lose sight of that. Yes, ideally you have a co-founder, you split it so that you have a person obsessed about the product and the technology and another person obsessed about the go-to-market side of it. That's how we do it at OpenRaven. I've seen other arrangements that work just fine. Again, your mileage varies. But having said that, you can't be in a position where you simply build the technology and the product and you don't hustle out, on the sales and marketing side as well. You have to have both in equal quantity. So, all right, that is it. I don't know if you have time for any final questions, but.
Thank you so much. I mean, everything that you said, I'm sure is very useful to the people on this call. Thank you so much for coming, for spending time with us. I'm definitely going to do some really quick housekeeping after So I don't want you to have to stay on for that, but do you have like maybe one piece of major advice, something you say to anyone who's, because we do have a lot of students who are not yet full-fledged entrepreneurs. They're thinking about it, they're participating in this program. We definitely have teams on this call. We have some faculty who's doing research, probably wanting to see if they can commercialize, but what would you say to the students about entering the world of entrepreneurship and startups? Anything that might inspire them, or maybe tell them, don't do it?
No, don't. Look, there'll be a time when it's right. I didn't start my first company, which is Open Raven, myself until I was 45. So, it's a season, and I'd rather had some great experience inside big companies and some great experience in other people's startups. Don't feel pressure, like wait until it's the right one. Like you don't have to swing at every pitch. Like you can wait a long time. I think I probably waited a bit too long. But having said that, it definitely, it's a commitment. And it isn't, I think people are beguiled by these immediate success stories and so forth. You're committing to probably, if you're successful, to a 5 to 10 year journey. Make sure you're ready for that, and that's what you want. And it's totally okay to say no. When I came out of CrowdStrike, I had a young boy, and I decided it wasn't the right time for me. I needed to be a great dad, so I didn't do it then. I went over and I helped the company get through an IPO. So just don't feel pressure. The season will come. You'll know when it's right, and you don't have to force it. And when you do, be ready for a long journey and make sure that that's right for you, right for your loved ones, and everything else.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Dave. All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to encourage everyone to turn on their cameras now. One quick reminder, 2 quick reminders. This is our next week's Oceanside chat speaker, Christopher Yang. He's TCA. He's going to come and speak to us about thriving in the midst of startup uncertainty. Same time, same day, Wednesday. These are our Oceanside chats. For all of the Summer Smasher students on the call, welcome. It's so nice to finally see your faces. I'm so sad we didn't do a real orientation, but I hope you guys were able to learn from the video orientation. This Friday, I will be going live on Instagram, so hopefully you guys are all on our Instagram. And one of you who has participated will be the lucky winner of, it's actually $25 of Postmates gift card spending money. So how do you guys get in that raffle? Jump on Instagram. Rachel is managing it. She's posting these get to know you questions, and just comment. Rachel, do you want to tell us what were the questions this week so far?
Yes, we actually had a lot of people responding, which is so great. So the first question was kind of just tell me about your name, if there's a story behind it, if there's a meaning, significance. The second question we had, oh man, I already forget, but today's was definitely where are you working out from, or where are you from, your hometown? And I believe the second one, RC, do you remember what it is?
It's languages. It was
languages, yeah. Which is actually really cool to see how many different languages everyone knows. So it's really great to get to know you guys and kind of do a little bit of icebreakers for our first week.
Yeah, okay. And so also, just so that you guys know, as we continue on with the program, lab is going to be, let's say you guys had some questions today for Oceanside chat and we're a little bit nervous to ask them. That's totally fine. We are all friends here on in this chat, right? Summer Smasher, you guys are all dealing with the same stuff. So during lab, ask those questions. Dr. David Gerber is watching these as well. And so he'll know exactly what you're talking about. If, for instance, Dave Cole mentioned something and you were like, what the hell is he talking about? Ask that question during your lab. Do you guys have any, for the sake of the video, I'm going to stop recording.